China's defense spending approaches that of the United States when we take into account purchasing power and the portion of our budget going to military pay and benefits. That, coupled with China's organized approach to steal foreign technology, has allowed China to modernize its missile, space, and cyber capabilities.
Well, that's Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan testifying before the Senate about China's military capabilities and strength. You know, despite so much talk in Washington about the threat with the border wall funding, while much of the nearly $720 billion the Pentagon is asking for in its 2020 budget, well, that spotlights China's growing threat to our national security. So, just how big is it? Dr. Rebecca Grant joins us, a national security and military analyst at IRIS Independent Research. Dr. Grant, how much of a danger does China actually really pose to the United States now and in the future?
China is not our friend, and they have gone from being a growing military power to being very close to a peer. They're a big danger because they are trying to focus on cyberspace, artificial intelligence, and they have modernized their Navy. They have 10 times the number of ships they used to have, a lot of new aircraft, and some scary new missiles. So they are the pacing threat in the Pacific.
All right, they have, you say, 10 times the number of ships they used to have. How about us? Are we at parrying that, or how are we when it stands to that?
Well, make no mistake, the U.S. Navy is still superior, but this defense budget specifically tries to improve our capabilities in air and space. We've also invested more in cyber, and we're looking at improvements in the Navy. This budget is, every program drives towards saying, China, watch out. The U.S. is going to stay on guard in the Pacific with our allies and make sure that we keep our edge against China in the Pacific.
And they have been doing so much and being so aggressive. If you lived over there and you got the South China Morning Post, here's the headline yesterday in the South China Morning Post. It says, quote, "Forget the Mexico border. The new military budget is focused on China, China, China." Acting Pentagon chief names hypersonic missiles, space operations, technology theft, and militarizing land in the South China Sea as threats posed by China and displacement of the United States. What happens if we don't act appropriately enough?
Oh, we have to, and we are. So specifically, hypersonic missiles, this defense budget is increasing the programs for hypersonic missiles across the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy. But Eric, there were two really big surprises in this defense budget that show me there was some arm wrestling going on in the Pentagon. Some Pentagon civilians went against the Air Force and said put in 8 Boeing F-15s, even though the Air Force hasn't bought F-15 since 1989. And then they also asked the Navy to cut out an aircraft carrier, the Harry S. Truman, right at a time when the Navy really needs more carriers in the Pacific. So those are going to be very hot issues for Congress to decide. Why should the Air Force buy old F-15Xs instead of the new stealth jets to oppose China?
What's the reason for that, do you think?
We don't know, and so all the defense analysts are wondering what's up with that, because the top leadership in the Air Force had said they need stealth aircraft like the F-35 and the F-22 to challenge China and, of course, Russia and others. And with the aircraft carrier, it's very puzzling because we want to have that forward presence in the Pacific. So we really need to keep the Truman and keep all the carriers. China is just too big of a threat, and we have to reach out with bombers, fighters, tankers in order to deter China's threats in the South China Sea and other areas.
I mean, China, they've already got their own aircraft carrier in development. So, you know, why would we take the Harry S. Truman out of the water?
Exactly. Their first carrier, the Liaoning, has already done flight operations. They have a second one ready and a third one laying the keel in dry dock. So it's no time to be cutting back our aircraft carrier force. We need that, but we need to fight in a multi-domain concept. So our military has to fight in air, space, cyber, land, undersea. It's that multi-domain concept that we see throughout this 2020 defense budget. And that's what's going to allow us to keep the edge over China, Russia, or anyone who buys their equipment.
And do you think, even with all their moves, that Taiwan is safe, that Taiwan, a flourishing democracy, is independent and can be protected appropriately?
Well, Taiwan is a flourishing democracy, and as you know, Eric, Taiwan is a treaty ally, so the U.S. does have a commitment to defend Taiwan if necessary, and I think we would do it.
And do you think, the Chinese have been kind of belligerent about Taiwan, more so just in the past year or so? I mean, is there any envisioning that you have that there could be some type of military conflict there, or Beijing would, know what it's up against?
Well, I think the key is to deter, and that's what we have that China doesn't. We have strong allies like Taiwan, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, of course. So we need to have that strong ability to deter. And the fact that we can look at the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea and exercise our forces and prepare, we deter China that way. And that's what we're looking for long-term, deterrence.
Finally, Dr. Grant, during his testimony, Patrick Shanahan also said this has been a growing problem for some time. I mean, what happened to the Obama administration pivot to Asia? I mean, wasn't that supposed to be the whole point of this, to try and prevent, this type of conflict?
Right, the pivot of 2012, and that was a good step, but we just didn't fund enough of the programs that we needed. So this budget tries to catch up with funding F-35, B-21 bomber, Navy modernization, more missile defense, air, space, cyber, but we're catching up, and China never had that holdback that we did within the Obama years and sequestration. They just kept driving forward and modernizing.
All right, we've got to, of course, be watchful for them. Dr. Rebecca Grant, who is appropriately attired on this St. Patrick's Day. Dr. Grant, as always, thank you.
Thank you.